Hello, everyone. We would like to welcome you and thank you for joining us this mid-September afternoon to the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency for our course with hands-on labs, CDM 220, and this is the CDM and federal mandates, how to use the CDM dashboard to enable automated BOD 2201 reporting. My name is Joe Bukovac, and I am part of the Education and Training section of the CISA Cybersecurity Division as the CDM Dashboard Training Lead. Before we get started, I would like to introduce today's instructors and share some logistical items. Today we have Mike and John as our instructors. Mike Jansen is a senior cybersecurity consultant with Motorola Solutions and has more than 20 years of experience in the field of cybersecurity. Mike is retired from the United States Air Force and has supported CDM and various DHS and CISA training and awareness programs for 9 years. John Stuppelbeam is also from Motorola Solutions and has over 12 years of experience in cybersecurity course development and instruction. John has supported the DHS CISA CDM training program for over 5 years. He has served in the United States Navy, where he performed systems integration and combat information center tactical team training. Now, a few disclaimers before we get started. Again, thanks for attending. It is now time to begin our journey into federal mandates and the CDM dashboard. I would like to introduce Mr. John Stuppelbeam, who will begin today's presentation.
All right, thanks, Joe, and welcome everybody. We're glad you could spend some time with us this afternoon. Let's take a look at where we're headed here today. So the course learning objectives. So cybersecurity mandates, policies, and directives come from a lot of different places. Okay, and this course is going to feature some of the current BODs, BODs 2201 and 2301, as put forth from the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. Okay, and there are other sources of federal mandates as well, and we'll take a look at those, as well as directives. And again, there's a number of different agencies where those can be generated. So we'll take a look at how that works. And then during this class, we'll also take a look at the directive creation process. We have a guest speaker that will cover that for us. And I'll cover some of the relevant mandates that relate to cybersecurity. Okay, and we'll also use the CDM agency dashboard to find vulnerabilities related to mandates. And then last but not least, we'll take a look at some of the incident and vulnerability response procedures and identify some resources that relate to current mandates and policies. All right. Policy creation and timeline. So we like to refer to this course as the cybersecurity civics, because as I mentioned, the mandates and the directives can originate from a number of branches of government. And after we learn about where the policy mandates come from, we'll take a look at the timeline and some significant mandates. So let's take a look here at what we have. All right, so what you see here is a collection of agencies and offices where mandates and directives can come from. Okay. Now, most come from the agencies, and most of those agencies are branches off of the executive office of the president or the president's cabinet. So let's take a look here at the first one, which is the legislative branch. And now, as you should recall from civics, again, the legislative branch is responsible for passing laws, right? And some of the committees where cybersecurity legislation can come from are listed here on the slide. And the more notable being the Homeland Security and Cybersecurity subcommittees. And ideas can vary can very well turn into legislation, but they can also find their way to an agency where it comes forth as an agency directive. So some of the key legislative actions of late are FISMA and the National Cybersecurity Protection Act, and also the Secure Technology Act. So items that have recently come from recent legislation. So next is the Office of the President, and the President can issue a presidential directive or an executive order, and presidents label directives differently, and it depends on what the directive affects. Now, we won't get into specifics, but suffice it to say that your role as a member of the executive branch, with the president as the CEO, for example, is to, heed the memo from the boss, right? Again, probably one of the most notable executive orders that has come down of late is 14028, which it's actually been a couple of years ago now, but pretty broad, sweeping order for cybersecurity. So, all right. Now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike to tell us about some agencies that might issue these directives. So Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, John, and good afternoon, everybody. So moving on to the agencies, the first one we're going to talk about is OMB, Office of Management and Budget. So OMB is a part of the Executive Office of the President, and they are responsible for overseeing the performance of federal agencies, and they also administer the federal budget. So agencies, they submit their annual FISMA reports to OMB as well. Some of the more recent memos released by OMB include M2131 regarding investigative and remediation capabilities. We have M2201, which provides guidance on the adoption of endpoint detection and response, or EDR, that commonly referred to, and M2209, which is zero trust architecture, and we're going to get more into those later. All right, our next one here is NIST. So, and that stands for National Institute for Standards and Technology, and they fall under the Department of Commerce. So they baseline information security plans and procedures, and they recommend types of security systems and software, and standardize risk assessment processes. A lot of y'all are probably familiar with NIST SP 800-53, the security controls, as well as SP 800-137 for continuous monitoring. Especially when we're talking about CDM, and then more recently, SP 800-207, which is regarding the zero trust architecture. So that's where NIST comes into play. All right, NSA. And I think we all know what NSA stands for, but that's National Security Agency, and they fall under the Presidential Cabinet of Department of Defense, and they are responsible for overall national security, of which cybersecurity, plays a pretty big part, right? A huge part. So, needless to say, mandates and policy that come from NSA, they carry a lot of weight. So, and then we have the GAO, and that stands for Government Accountability Office, and they, it's another agency that we hear about often. And although, we're talking about executive agencies, technically GAO falls under the legislative branch, and the GAO, they're responsible for tracking all the rules in the federal government. One could classify the GAO as the internal auditors for the federal government, per se. So the GAO, they study actions taken from the agencies and provide lawmakers with their findings, and they offer feedback on the BODs and EDs, Binding Operational Directives, and the ED. So, for example, ED 2101, which had dealt with the solar winds vulnerability. That all got summarized in the GAO report, the GAO 22-104746. Yes, there'll be a quiz on that later, so make sure you're paying attention. Just kidding. But it documents the federal response to the incident, and if you're interested, we've got a link here that I'll post just in case you want to find more information on that. So there it is. And then next we have GSA. And that's General Service Administration. All right, in the chat pod, if you know who GSA falls under, can you post that in the chat? Just curious if anybody knows. And this could be a trick question. All right, good job. So nobody, they're independent of the three branches. So being that they're independent, they fall outside the jurisdiction of those three branches of government. And the head of the department, however, the head is a presidential appointee. But the GSA provides management and administrative support to the entire federal government and establishes acquisition vehicles for agencies to use. GSA also administers the Federal Risk and Authorization Management Program, also known as FedRAMP, which promotes the use of secure cloud-based services in government. So with that, our next thing we're going to talk about is the one we're all very intimately familiar with, CISA. So over to you, John.
All right, thanks, Mike. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and introduce our first guest speaker, Mr. Tom Hollowell, and he's going to tell us a little bit about CISA and also the BOD and ED release process. So Tom is the FISMA lead for the Enterprise Implementation Division within the CISA capacity building. And Tom is also the lead person for Cyberscope, which we'll be talking about BOD reporting a little bit later on. So Tom, I know you have a lot of good information for us, so I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, John. I can't make any guarantees as to the quality of the information, but I'll do my best. My name is Tom Hollowell, and as John mentioned, I wear a couple different hats. I work on the directives team to write and also monitor and track and sort of do analysis on the directives, binding operational and emergency directives that CISA issues. I also support the FISMA team as product owner for the Cyberscope system. And as you all probably know, that's the go-to platform for federal cybersecurity reporting. And we have recently begun a lot of work to auto-import various compliance metrics into the Cyberscope for both FISMA and BOD reporting. So before I start talking about this slide, I want to thank all of you for attending this training. I know you've got lots of stuff to do at work. And so thanks for being here and supporting this training and learning more about CDM and the requirements behind it. So About CISA briefly, we've been given the authority to issue binding operational directives and emergency directives that would require agencies to do cybersecurity work to help improve the overall security and resilience of federal information systems. We've also begun to dip our toe into the private sector, although right now I don't think our authority is quite as, we don't have the same level of authority with the private sector, but a lot of people have started, and organizations have started adopting the BOD and also some of our capacity enhancement guides and reference architectures and things as a way of securing themselves and also as a way of interacting with federal agencies on a more secure basis. So let's move to slide 17, please. So we've issued a lot of BODs, and actually this isn't 100% up to date. We've got a new BOD out, which I'll talk about briefly as well. So among those that are currently active is 1902, which is about scanning internet-facing resources for vulnerabilities, leveraging the CyHy program, so cyber hygiene, which is kind of like an internet-facing unauthenticated CDM, if you will. It looks for vulnerabilities, and we then leverage the BOD to set timelines to remediate the findings. BOD 2001 required agencies to establish a vulnerability disclosure program, which is available as a CISA shared service. And that allows members of the public to report vulnerabilities they find on federal information systems. 2201 created a list of known exploited vulnerabilities, and those are vulnerabilities that are actually being exploited in the wild right now, or at the time when they're added to the known exploited vulnerability or KEV catalog, and it requires agencies to remediate them within 2 weeks. BOD 2301 supported that BOD by establishing a minimum cadence and coverage for asset discovery and vulnerability enumeration. So to both do scans to discover assets and then to do vulnerability enumerations that would identify unpatched applications and potentially vulnerable known exploited vulnerabilities that need to be patched. And we just issued another one, 2302, and that is working in conjunction with the cyber hygiene program again to identify network management interfaces that are facing the internet. And so that's a new one, and is still kind of a work in progress. We're just starting to begin reporting on that. And then we can talk about an emergency directive. So these are compulsory directions. An emergency directive, and I'll talk about this more in a second, but basically an emergency directive is really something to stop an immediate threat, and they tend to have limited time windows. So emergency directive 2203, I believe, was the most recent ED, and it required agencies to mitigate a critical VMware vulnerability within a really tight time window. And let's go to slide 18. So this is not a new board game. It's just a diagram to show you that we don't develop these directives in a vacuum. We do a ton of internal research and socialization and drafting and reviewing, and then we send them to external SMEs, lawyers, OMB, NIST, agency CISOs, and in some cases even vendors. And we analyze those outcomes, the outcomes of those conversations, and input from agencies, both for reporting and to improve our process for creating future BODs. So I'll leave this up for a second for y'all to read. And if anybody has any questions, please post them in the chat, and I'll address them either during the chat or during my presentation or immediately following. So let's move out of the game of life here And we go to the next slide. All right, text wall. Everybody loves a text wall in a presentation. So you might want to zoom in to read this a little bit better. This explains the difference between BODs and EDs. In brief, a BOD is strategic and proactive. It's intended to help agencies up their cybersecurity game over the long term. It helps keep the genie in the bottle, so to speak. Emergency directives are reactive. They're generally written and approved within days, if not hours. So BODs can take months to write because they're going to be something that agencies are required to do on a continual basis. So those take months and a lot of vetting. Emergency directives, we often draft and issue at the request of somebody like NSA or OMB. And the approval process is much shorter and much more abbreviated, shall we say, streamlined. And those can get approved within days, if not hours, of a significant urgent threat being identified. SolarWinds, Log4j are two recent examples. These were both being exploited all over the place, and we needed agencies to lock things down quickly because the genie was already out of the bottle, to overextend that bad metaphor. So now, if everybody's read this, we'll go on to slide 20. So another text wall for y'all. You can read along with me here. There's a number of different types of directives. Like I said before, the emergency directives tend to be more risk-based, but BODs can be too. We're either responding to something that's already happening or operationalizing a capability that CISA has observed not to be sufficiently mature to adequately address contemporary threats. For example, the creation of the KEV catalog for BOD 2201 has helped agencies up their vulnerability remediation game while also reducing their attack surface for over 1,000 vulnerabilities. And those are vulnerabilities that hackers are exploiting everywhere, all over the internet now. But 2201 is also strategic. It directed agencies to adjust their policies and procedures around project management so that they could increase their cadence. 2301 is even more strategic because it sets audacious goals around asset scanning. And that increased depth and scanning depth and cadence, as well as disciplined updating of vulnerability signatures, supports 2201 by speeding up the feedback loop around vulnerability detection and remediation. So all of the directives include direction around policy, governance, and reporting. This ensures measurable, repeatable processes and holds both agencies and CISA accountable for results. We have the flexibility to scope the directives too. I'm not aware of us issuing a directive that targets a specific agency, but we do have that discretion should the need arise. We can also slice it by system. For example, we have a BOD 1801 that requires agencies to identify high-value assets and sets more stringent security and reporting requirements for those critical systems. By contrast, most of the emergency directives target a specific technology or service. And I think that's it for the Tom Show.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. I think we'll be, I think you'll be back in a little while to cover some of the reporting aspects of the BODs, but we appreciate the info here. Good stuff. And with that, I will turn it over to Mike to take us into some of the legislative timeline.
Yeah, thank you. That was good overview on BODs and EDs. All right, so some more exciting stuff here. So this slide, actually, when we created it, was animated, but doesn't work as well in WebEx. So you can use your imagination. But this one, we just want you to be mindful that mandates and policies, they have to pass through several layers before they become operational. And the purpose of the first part of our instruction is to introduce you to where the directives and mandates come from, as well as the substance behind them when they're issued. So yeah. And here's another game of life. So the legislative timeline here just kind of walks us through where you can kind of see how things started all the way from the Fourth Amendment in 1791 to where we're at today. But here you can see some of the major laws, directives, and mandates that have basically gotten us to where we are today. So as you can see on this graphic here, that we've been legislating cybersecurity for the last 50 years, with the Privacy Act being kind of the cornerstone of that legislation. So, but let's now take a high-level look at some of the acts and mandates that you need to be mindful of. So the Privacy Act of 1974, as I mentioned, is the cornerstone legislation that regulates the collection, maintenance, use, and dissemination of personal information, which nowadays is done electronically, right? It was created to protect the privacy of individuals, as well as their right to know what information is being collected and how it's being used. It also ensures that the information will be used only for the purpose intended, and that the government will take reasonable precautions to protect it. And we got the Computer Security Acts of the 1980s. They ushered in repercussions for federal computer crime and misuse of systems. It required federal agencies to take measures to prevent unauthorized access to computers containing sensitive information, and established NIST as the authority for developing standards and guidelines for federal computer systems. CFO Act of 1990, that act gave OMB new authority and responsibility for directing federal financial management, modernizing the government's financial management systems, and strengthening financial reporting. Simply put, it draws the money and funding into the picture. And then, 1996, Klinger-Cohen essentially revamped IT acquisition for the federal government by requiring agencies to assess and manage risk of IT assets. It also established the office of the CIO to help ensure these requirements were being met. So now let's take a closer look at FISMA and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Act of 2018. All right, so FISMA 2002 superseded many of the computer laws that came before it and created many new specific security responsibilities for agencies to follow. FISMA came about through Homeland Security Act of 2002, which also created the Department of Homeland Security. In a response to the number of cyber attacks on the federal government, FISMA 2014 codified the Department of Homeland Security's role in administering the implementation of information security policies for federal civilian executive branch agencies, which we'll often hear called FSEB agencies. They oversee their compliance with policies and assist OMB in developing new ones. This legislation provides the DHS the authority to develop and oversee the implementation of binding operational directives in coordination with OMB policies and practices. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to John to cover another piece of legislation. So back to you, John.
All right, thank you, sir. Let's take a look at the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Act of 2018. And, you know, basically all of what we've covered leads us to this particular piece of legislation. And this act created the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA. So CISA came about in 2018. And it also made it the primary gateway for cybersecurity information sharing between the private sector and the federal government. And legislation, as well as directives, can be passed from DHS through CISA to the agencies to operationalize, as they need to. And this is why we really need to make sure that we're following the guidance of BODs and EDs. All right. That brings us to our first lab exercise. So what I need you to do is hang with me here for just a few minutes because I've got some important information I need to put out to you regarding the dashboard training environment. So I'm going to go ahead and share out my screen. Okay. Now, what you see here is the CVLE dashboard, the Cyber Virtual Learning Environment. Okay, this is not to be confused with the agency dashboard that you'll be doing your labs in. Okay, so once you get logged in, this is the dashboard that will come up. Okay, and what I need you to do is look for CDM 220, CDM Dashboard, and Federal Mandates, and we're going to give that a click. And that takes us into the course page. Okay, so this is the course that you're taking. There's some information here at the top. Here's the slides that you can download as well as the lab guides. If you have not downloaded the lab guides, please do that now. Okay, because you'll want to have those available as you work through the labs. Here's the supplemental docs that I mentioned earlier. You can take a look at those when you get a chance. At the very bottom is the feedback survey. I just want to point that out briefly so that you know where to find it later. You will need to come back into the CVLE course page in order to do your survey. Okay, but what we're going to do now is we're going to click on student range. So there's a little icon here. We're going to click on student range. Okay, and then we're going to click on launch in range. Actually, but let me point this out to you first. The login information down here in the lower left corner, this is the login information you'll use for the agency dashboard. Everybody has the same login. Okay, it's elastic, lowercase, all lowercase, and password with a capital P. Okay, so we're going to click launch in range. Give it a second to think about it. Oh, sorry about that, folks. I'm already logged in, so it didn't ask me for that password, but you should be prompted for a user ID and password. Go ahead and type in elastic, all lowercase, and then password with a capital P, and click the login button, and that will bring you to this page. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to select Agency Dashboard. That's where we're going to start off today. And let me just pull this up here real quick. All right, give me 1 second. All right, there we go. Okay, that's going to bring you to this page, which looks like this. Now, I want to point out one thing here about the date time filter, which is what you see right here. It defaults to last 30 days, so you're going to need to set a specific date range in order for your labs to work. So what I need you to do is click on last 30 days. Okay, that's going to change it to a relative date range. Okay, and then we're going to click a month ago, and that brings up this little box. Okay, from here we're going to click absolute. Okay, and then we're going to select the month, and the month that we're going to use is May 1st. Go ahead and click May 1st, 2022. Okay, and you notice it changes it up here, and we're going to click now, which brings up that same box. We're going to say absolute, and this time we're going to say November 30. Okay, November 30, 2022. Okay, and you see here that we have our date range in here, May 1st, 2022 to November 30th, 2022, and I'm going to click update. Okay, and that's going to populate all these visualizations that you see here, all these panels. Okay, slowly but surely. Now, if you notice, there's a little calendar icon here on the left-hand side, okay, with a down arrow. Now, as you go through your labs, it's going to remind you to reset your date, okay? All you need to do now, since you've set it one time, is come down here to do the drop-down arrow and come down to recently used date ranges and select the range that you have, okay? May 1st to November 30th. That's all you need to do. You don't have to go through all that other stuff, okay? You can just select from the recently used dates there in the list. Okay, now what I wanted to show you for your first lab, let me go ahead, I'm going to take us to the directives dashboard. This is all in your lab, by the way, on how to navigate here, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but if you notice right here in the upper left corner, it says emergency directives and binding operational directives. Okay, these are all links, all right? And unfortunately, the links aren't linked. So our tech guys are working on it as we speak, but for the moment, the links are not linked. So I'm going to show you how to get to different parts of this dashboard without having to click these links, okay? So what you need to do, if it tells you to navigate to BOD 2201, for example, okay, rather than click that, if you notice right up here, next to the red D, there's a blue dashboard. And as I hover over it, it gives me the little hand icon, which tells me it's a link. So all you have to do is click dashboard. And that brings up a list of all those dashboards. It's just the same as you would see there on that page. It's in a list instead. And what you would do is you would click the one that you're after. So let's just say 2201. Okay, and that will bring up the dashboard. Otherwise, you'll get an error. I think it just says okay. That's how you navigate to the different dashboards. And I think in this first lab, you have a couple of places, maybe 3 places where you need to navigate. So just remember, click dashboard and then select the one out of the list that you need. Okay, so if I need to go back, I just click dashboard, directives overview, and it will take me back to the overview dashboard. Okay, all right. So with all of that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here so we can get back to where we need to be. All right, so for this lab exercise, you're going to be using the visualization panels on the directives overview dashboard to identify key vulnerability information. And then you'll use the multiple directives dashboards to identify information about vulnerabilities. within a specific binding operational directive, or ED. So you will need to navigate to those different dashboards. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and put, I think we'll do 15 minutes on the clock. And let's put in, let's do an additional 5 minutes for a break. So we'll do 20 minutes total. And that way you can get a cup of coffee or stretch your legs. So we've been at this for a little bit already. So we're going to set the timer for 20 minutes. I'll check back before the timer runs out to see how everybody's doing. If we need to extend it a few minutes, we can do that. Okay, but I want to keep us rolling because we have some more guest speakers coming. So I want to make sure we have time for you to hear their presentations. So, okay, if we could put 20 minutes on the clock, and we'll see you back at 2:10. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully you were able to make your way through the lab, as well as get a fresh cup of coffee or a Coca-Cola or whatever you drink in the afternoon to keep you going. So let me share out my screen here, and we'll go through this lab real quick. So, okay. All right. So you should see the dashboard. And what I've done, I worked ahead just a little bit here. We are on step 4. So we need to verify our date. If you notice, it's defaulted back to last 30 days. So I'm just going to go ahead and click that down arrow and do my recently used date range, and you'll see that it pops that in there. Okay. All right. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going over the step actions, because basically this lab is meant to familiarize you with this particular dashboard. So it just explains the different visualizations that you see here, instances by directive ID. This is handy. If you just hover over these, you can get an idea of the count and also the percent of that particular BOD or ED in relation to the whole. We have a cool graph here that shows you the relationship of the BOD to the system boundary, or the system boundary to the BOD, whichever one you decide to use. You just scroll up and down there on the left or right hand side. Instances by CVE ID, instances by software, again, just gives you a visual on where you're at. We also have instances by organizational unit there on the left, and trend of instances. Now, if you look at step 11 in your lab guide, you'll see a much more representative picture of what this should look like. We only ingested data twice into the training environment, which is why we have that little funny line there in the upper right corner. But if you look at step 11, that's more indicative of what you would see at your agency probably. Next, you have list of instances vulnerabilities, okay, listed by vulnerability, listed by software, and then lastly, HVA. Okay, so, all right. Now, step 16 and 17 wanted you to navigate to the BOD 2201 dashboard, which you would have done here, okay, in this particular area here in the upper left. But we're going to click dashboard, and then we're going to click BOD 2201, and that will take us to the BOD 2201 dashboard. And if you notice, it looks very similar, right? a lot of the same information. It's just that you have a list of instances table here versus a software and vulnerability and so on. Okay, so you have all the instances listed here. Okay, so this is for BOD 2201. All right, now to get back, we just click the dashboard again, and we click Directives Overview, and that will take us back. Okay, all right. So let's take a look now at the knowledge checks here at the end. All right, so number one, it says using the Directives Overview dashboard, identify the percentage of instances by directive ID for ED 2202. Okay, make sure your date is set to from May to November, which we've got that here, so that's okay. Now, if we just look here at the list of or instances by directive ID, as I mentioned a moment ago, if you just hover over these, it will give you the percentage that you're looking for, right? And we want the percentage for ED 2202. So if we hover over that, we can see that we have 11.17%. So our answer for number one is C, 11.17. Okay. Now, number two, it says from the Directives Overview dashboard, scroll down to the List of Instances software panel. All right. List of Instances software. There we go. And it says, what is the number of Orion instances for DHS organizational unit? Now, there's a couple of ways we can do this. We can do an add filter, which if we go back up here to the top, there's a place where you can click add filter, okay, which is kind of the long way. I'll tell you what, let's do it for one and then we'll do the shortcut for the other. So let's go ahead, we'll filter for DHS. So I'll say add filter, okay, and then we're going to say organization ID, okay, is DHS. And we'll click save. And you'll notice that when we put that in there, we get a filter right here in the upper left, and all of the information changes. So now let's take a look at the software section. Okay, and now we're going to filter for Orion because we need to know the number of Orion instances. So if you notice, we've got Orion here under finding software finding name. Okay, and if I hover over it, I get the plus and the minus. Okay, and if I want to filter for Orion, I hit the plus. If I want to filter out Orion, I hit the minus. So this is a nice little shortcut. I'll just hit plus. Okay, and it filters for Orion. You see that the highlighted columns are what we're filtered on. Okay, and if you notice here in the upper right corner, we have 112 documents. Okay, so our answer for number two is A, 112. All right, number three, it says click the BOD 2201 link under the Binding Operational Directives heading. All right, so there we go. We're headed to a different dashboard. So rather than click the link, we're going to click dashboard. And we're going to click 2201. Okay. And it says here, identify the total number of critical instances in the DHS contractor organization using the list of instances visualization panel. Okay, let's scroll down. We'll take a look here. Okay, it wants to know DHS contractor and critical instances. So what we're going to do is we're going to filter for DHS contractor, and if you notice, if I hover over it, I just click the plus. Now, I call it a shortcut because it's just that. It's a shortcut. If you have to scroll and scroll and scroll to find the right value to filter on, you're better off to just go up and do the add filter like we did earlier. Okay, but since these are easy to find, we can go ahead and do the shortcut. So here we have vulnerability finding CVE severity, okay, which is going to give us our critical. I'll go ahead and filter for that. And that gives us 1,294 documents, okay, for number 3. So A is our answer. All right, last one. Under emergency directives in the upper right corner, we're going to go to emergency directive 2202. Okay, so we'll just click dashboard 2202. Okay, adjust your date, which our date is okay, so we don't need to do anything with that. Using the list of instances visualization panel, identify how many critical instances exist within CBP organizational units. So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, it wants to know about CBP. So here's CBP. We can do our shortcut. And just like before, it wants to know critical. So here's critical right at the top of our list. So go ahead and click critical. And now we have filters for CBP and critical, which leaves us with 502 items. Okay. So our answer for number 4 is D, 502. Okay. We go ahead and stop sharing here. Get back to our presentation. And I think what we want to do at this point is I'm going to turn it over to Mike to tell us about some of the current mandates that are out there. So Mike, take it away.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, I got through our first lab, and just to kind of give you all a heads up, I mean, if you noticed, we were currently using the version ES5 for the dashboard, but ES6 is out now, and we're currently converting our lab, our range environment to ES6. So, but coming up here in a little bit, though, Judy Baltenberger is going to give us a demo and tell us about some of those updates as well. So, yeah, looking forward to that. So, with current mandates, so we already kind of mentioned and talked through these policy directives. So I'll just let you read through those. But our focus here is on BOD 2201 and BOD 2301 for operational directives. And, you know, Tom talked about operational directives, and that, you know, the emergency directives are the quick reaction. These BODs, operational directives, take a little more vetting because they require some actions that need to be taken from the agencies, and the dashboard is a useful tool for that. But to kind of help us talk more about the BODs and risk management, we have another guest speaker for you. We have Mr. Dave Otto, and Dave is the risk management SME for the dashboard effort, and he's here with us to talk about that, talk about risk management and some of the current BODs. So thanks for joining us, Dave, and as always, you always have some outstanding information, so can't wait to hear. So over to you, Dave. Okay, is Dave on? Well, maybe Dave is
there. I was.
Oh.
made a panelist, so I can talk now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
The promotion I've always been waiting for. Thanks everybody for joining the class today, of the course. I think that this is important piece of learning for you to get active in the dashboard and use this, what is a very important tool, and comes at a time where we're trying to change from kind of a pure compliance, pure data call mentality to a data-driven approach to cyber, and I'll give you a lot of rationales for why that's important and effective. But let's just say that I think the entire direction of cyber is moving toward the idea that we have to more effectively use the data we have to not only for operations, but for performance management and measurement. So get a little into that. You heard earlier in today's course about the various authorities, and I'm going to assume by virtue of you being here, you're familiar with the risk management framework. And if you are familiar with the RMF, you should probably be familiar with this pyramid in front of you. The interesting thing about this is, to me right now, is that it's not, if this were a managerial accounting course on budgeting or strategy, we might see a very similar type of pyramid, because budgeting is about developing the strategy for an organization. It's about establishing the objectives and tasks and policy that's going to bring about that strategic vision, and it's going to reach down into operations. And whether that, if you are an organization that is making widgets or selling widgets, it's going to reach down there, and the results of those operational activities, ideally on the left side of this diagram, are going to matriculate back up to the top, because they should speak very directly to, are we meeting our goals and objectives? To what extent are we making widgets, selling widgets, identifying vulnerabilities, patching vulnerabilities? Whatever that operational activity is, it has outputs, and those outputs should speak directly to the strategy. And when we have that relationship between strategy coming down to operations in a very clear way that can be executed, and when the execution of that activity can move back up to management and speak to the results, speak to the extent that we're meeting our strategy, that's good. That's good, efficient management that signifies a return on investment or return on value for those activities. And I'm couching those in business terms, because the RMF is kind of where, in that middle tier, level 2, that's where bits and bytes meet dollars and cents. We need to make sure we're doing the right thing, we're invested in the right things, because risk management, cyber, is a resource constrained activity. We have $1 to do $10 worth of things at any given moment in time, and we need to make sure that that dollar is being rightly applied. And so that is really the purpose of the risk management framework, is to make sure we're applying the right amount of cost-effective risk treatment in the right places. And so when we can monitor that activity, when we can then get the real results in terms of telemetry data, and start to measure that and start to have a good relationship between what the strategy is and what the activities and results are, that is, I think we will all benefit from that. That will make for an improved, cyber footprint. So go on to the next slide, please. Or do I have the ability to do that? Oh, sorry, I do. I'll talk about a few of the BODs and the dashboard, but I'll say up front, the dashboard is not a magic bullet in the sense that if you as an agency are simply treating BOD 2201, for instance, as a pure compliance play. The DA says to do it, we're doing it, the results are in the dashboard, and that's all we're doing it, I would suggest you're missing a great opportunity. Because again, if you look at your organization and your strategy, increasingly, we are moved, and the recent executive order asks us on zero trust, but is explicit part of that is to adopt a risk-based approach. And I interpret that to mean that I need to identify my critical terrain, my high value assets. I need to be very particular in that that resource constrained equation of $1 to do $10 worth of things. I need to make sure I'm making that dollar count. And so when you get these BODs, I've heard people refer to, the OMB stuff or directives from DHS as unfunded mandates. Well, they're actually not unfunded mandates. You may not be resourced at a point where this BOD comes out. Your resources may not be arrayed in a way that is, ready day one for this, but you are budgeted to do cyber and vulnerability management, et cetera. And it may take some thinking in terms of how you're going to accommodate this, but you're definitely going to be able to accommodate this, whether that's in a budgeting process with OMB, working with your budget examiner, et cetera. But the money will be there to do these things. But for this particular thing, I don't think this is about money. I don't think this is asking you to do much that's new. It is asking you to prioritize on the vulnerabilities that actually matter the most. And matter the most is kind of subjective. You can say that, well, we were invested in using CVSS. And to us, CVSS 10, it's clearly stated in our policy, a CVSS 10 matters the most. And that is the best approach that we had. But CVSS scores are actually not about criticality sometimes. It's a interesting mashup of potential and likelihood, but it doesn't actually measure the idea that this thing is happening and this is super critical. And so what you have are a lot of CVS. Well, I mean, bottom line, the research is clear that only a subset of CVs are ever exploited or exploitable. And so we know that there are a lot of CVSS 8, 9s, 10s that have not been exploited, and there's a good likelihood they will not be. We know that there are CVSS 5s that are being exploited. So where are you going to focus your energy? Are you going to put it into a CVSS 10 that is not exploitable, or a CVSS 5 that is? And so that is BOD 2201 and the KEV program identifying for you, centralizing the activity of saying, you don't need to go through the process of examining and localizing a CVSS score for yourself. You have a centralized activity that is using sophisticated threat intelligence to say, this thing is out there, it's active, you want to do something about it. So the dashboard has that information. You've already gone through an exercise where you can look at those things. But what I'm here to say is that what I think is a best practice is to incorporate this into your agency's strategy and policies, so that your vulnerability management policy, your patch management policy is clear that this is your number one priority. And then second priority would probably be those CVSS 8, 9, 10s that are not KEVs. They would probably exist on a different timeline in terms of your tolerances. And that 7 and below has yet another tolerance that might be more about a maintenance cycle, which is not to say that those things don't matter. They do. But if we go back to cost constrained activities, we just want to make sure that we're prioritizing on the right things, and we're the things that aren't necessarily as risky to us, don't represent as much immediate risk. We can have more tolerance for those things. We can build those things into maintenance cycles, and we can say that, you know, if it's a CVSS 5 or below, I'm going to fix, that's not a KEV, I'm going to move that to like a 6-month maintenance cycle or a baseline type of activity. And so when you do that, now you can start to use the results of the dashboard to do more than just report back to DHS. Now you can do that to report up in your agency as to your performance metrics for your activity. You can build these kinds of things into contracts with your vendors to say, you're going to need to maintain a high score on KEVs that's literally above average for the government, the rest of the government, you know, in order to get that performance award. Those types of activities is where we would love to see this heading. So that was BOD 2201. And then the next one, BOD 2301, represents, I think, a really interesting, I don't think it's a wrinkle, but it's a furtherance of the idea that, all right, if we take the concept of BOD 2201 and just patch management, what were the major constraints to success with that? What would stop us from having really excellent situational awareness to, you know, what our true posture was at any given moment? And this is for anybody using the dashboard. These should be universal concerns for you. Is that, what is my real visibility? Am I looking at a dashboard picture and I'm saying, well, that's my KEV picture, but actually we've only got 50% of our assets under management. So is that your true KEV picture? Because I would say from a theoretical perspective, unmanaged space is unsafe space. If you can't even put that space under management, it's not that you just don't know. It's a safe assumption that there are maybe bad things happening there. Why isn't it under management to begin with? So you should be, if you're a reporter, if you're reporting this up to your CISO or you know, CFO or whoever, you should be very attuned to the number of assets you have under management versus the number of assets you think you have. What is the process for bringing those other assets under management? Where is that project at? Is something happening with that? If not, why not? That's vulnerability management, is to understand that scope. And second, to understand your data quality. Okay, we have 90% of our assets under management. That's our goal. That is according to our, you know, our policy and our acquisitions. That's kind of where we're supposed to be at right now. But I have all these data quality issues, and so do I actually trust the data? You might like the number you're seeing in the dashboard, but that doesn't mean you should stop there, okay? You should be able to understand, is that a right number? Am I able to trust that number? Is it sufficient, reliable? Do we have all the data we need to actually report this to the CISO to say, yeah, this is a true up. This is good, reliable data. So BOD 2301 was about creating greater visibility to increasing the number of vulnerability scans were happening and increasing the tempo at which we were vulnerability scanning. I think that if you were to look at the policy environment prior to 2301, there was no directive that said you must scan at a certain tempo. I mean, it was supposed to be risk-based, but every NIST control obviously says, according to the organizational standards. And when we went out and started doing assessments for the HVA program, let me just say that we were surprised at certain high-value systems where there wasn't as much vulnerability management activity going on as we would have hoped or assumed. So this establishes a tempo. It establishes automated ingestion of the KEV data for prioritization. You have to develop and maintain operational capability for on-demand action so that if there were a break glass type situation or alert come down that there's some dangerous threat activity happening, DHS could initiate a on-the-spot scan. We need you to scan now, and that could be to instantiate that capability to initiate that scan. Deploy the updated CDM Dashboard configuration that enables access to the object level vulnerability enumeration. That would be the cross-site search capability. And in ES6, we've got persistence, we've got cross-site search, we've got that kind of visibility now available. And that that you're responsible as an agency to collect and report this information. So again, it took the concept of 2301. We want you to do a focus on this thing, but then it kind of, I see it as, it looked at the constraints that stopped us from having the best available approach to doing that scanning, reacting to that scanning, and it instantiated those activities. So with that, I believe I am, is this my slide or am I handing this over, Mike?
Yeah, so I'm not sure, did on 2301, the FSUB actions?
No, on slide 33, agency responsibilities.
Okay. Nope, I'll take it from there. Thank you. Yeah, I know you.
Okay.
It seemed like you were changing slides, but it was actually me. But anyway, yeah, thank you, Dave. Always great information. Seeing how
It's a pleasure to join you guys. And I guess I didn't ask if there are any questions. If there are any questions, if you want to put them in the chat, I'll hang out for a few minutes and respond to anything that comes up. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Otto. All right, so yeah, the next slide, just to kind of continue on with the BODs and kind of what agency responsibilities there are, reporting timelines for BOD 2201 and 2301. I'm gonna bring Mr. Tom Hollowell back on to talk to these next few slides on that. Tom?
Hello again. I'm back to talk about BOD reporting. And so first I'll touch on some specific reporting requirements around some of the BODs. I think Dave Otto just covered a lot of the reporting, burden and benefits, so to speak. So I'm going to speak at a slightly higher level. OMB Memo M22-20 directs agencies to report on their KEVs. CDM release ES6 now, which is almost old news to all of you by now, enables automated reporting and a lot more analytics and drill downs into FSMA and BOD compliance data. And so within 90 days of beginning to report on an automated basis, agencies were expected to hit a 65% CDM coverage threshold or AIM score, and to get to 80+% within 180 days of automating their reporting. You know, the data should be accurate. You should validate that the data in the agency dashboard is, or the federal dashboard is accurate, and work to improve it. You know, maintain the data exchanges and the IT infrastructure that supports it. Keep your agency and federal dashboard versions up to date so that you have all the capabilities to do reporting. You know, work with the IPT to ensure success. You know, work with the CDM program office and the solution integrators. Provide inputs to provide requirements as the CDM program and dashboards evolve. Use the tools and the dashboard into your governance policies and procedures and ongoing ops where appropriate, because then you can really start using it as point in time data and have that dialogue within your agency about what is ground truth and what is representative and what is actionable. And that will enable you to use the CDM dashboard to mitigate cyber risks. Let's go to the next slide. So again, to repeat my initial little diatribe, is M1222, which was the FSMA guidance, I believe, required everybody to automate their reporting if possible. We set a 50% threshold for people to start automating reporting. And that goes also for FSMA reporting. So it's 50%. You need to get to 65% within 90 days of having automated, and then 80% within 180 days. And I believe that that is pretty much the glass ceiling of most people's current agreements, SLAs with CDM is 80%. So I'm not sure where it's going to go from that, but we're absolutely, I encourage agencies to push the limit on this and get the envelope as big as possible. And then the KEV findings are reported to CISA via the dashboard. And we're also beginning to work on some performance metrics, exactly when, in terms of, you know, what percentage of assets were last seen within 7 days, what percentage of assets were vulnerability scanned recently, when were the vulnerability signatures updated, et cetera, et cetera. But those are still a work in progress. And in terms of CDM dashboard, I believe. So let's go to the next slide. This again is probably OBE for most agencies at this point, but BOD 2301, that's the asset visibility BOD that requires the scanning, sets a requirement for some kind of program review every 6 months to see if your agency's on track. You have to either provide a report in deathless prose, sort of a term paper, if you will, on challenges you've encountered while trying to meet the requirements of BOD 2301. Or you can engage with the CDM team in an asset management baseline review. That's where they work with your agency to analyze your CDM data to identify gaps and opportunities to improve data quality. And that's a much more collaborative approach and enables you to work directly with your system integrators to find ways to up your reporting game. So that's probably the better one. And also it helps them identify any bugs or logic errors in their reporting and system in the CDM itself. So now this may be my last slide here, and number 36. So BOD 2201 requires every agency to report twice a month, either manually or on an automated basis via the CDM Federal Dashboard. And again, if the number of assets reported to CDM is above 50% of the asset count reported in FSMA, and that is the case for most agencies now, there's a couple of exceptions, then you are eligible for automated reporting and no action is required on your part, because we'll pull the data from CDM and populate Cyberscope, and you don't have to do a thing. If the number of assets is less than 50%, then your agency still has to report manually. There are also a couple of agencies that don't feel that the data that they're feeding to CDM right now is reflective. Maybe there's an agency that isn't fully reporting to CDM, or there's some data quality issues. So some agencies have opted out of automation, and we're doing what we can to help them get into automation. Again, BOD 2301 reporting is required every 6 months, either free text in the Cyberscope system or by engaging in asset management baseline or AMB review with CDM. That being said, we are working on automating some measures of performance that should be, and measures of effectiveness that should be rolling out fairly soon, both in your dashboard and in, I'm not sure if it'll be in Cyberscope or if we'll just be using it for reporting to stakeholders and for engaging with agencies. But we will certainly let you know as that matures. And with that, thank you so much again for your time and attention. I'm going to hand you back to Mike. Hope everybody has a wonderful autumn season. And if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat in the next couple minutes, and I will try to answer them in the chat.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Great information once again. Kind of good to know those timelines, and those some of our information there is a little outdated, but yeah, it's that gradual conversion and automation that we all want to get to. Helps makes things a lot easier on folks. So, all right, I got just to see if everybody's still awake out there. Can you give me a thumbs up if you've ever heard of the President's Executive Order 14028? Thumbs up or thumbs down if you haven't. All right, I see a couple people still awake. All right, thank you. Okay. So in recent years, persistent and sophisticated threats to the public and private sector have prompted the federal government to improve its efforts to protect against and respond to cyber threats. Executive order outlines, this executive order outlines 6 key points, which you see here on the slide. And these key points cover a broad range of topics such as information sharing, zero trust architecture, supply chain security, Federal Cyber Review Board, better incident response preparedness, and improved remediation capabilities. So real quick on EO 14028. Next, we'll talk about M2201, and that is the EDR one. So EO 14028 also directs agencies to put in place a robust endpoint detection and response solution to help in shifting cyber defense from a reactive to a proactive posture. And not to be confused with BOD 2201, M2201 is EDR. So some of the objectives in the memo include improved agency capabilities for early detection, response, and remediation of cybersecurity incidents on their networks using advanced technologies and leading practices. Also, agency enterprise level visibility across components, bureaus, sub-agencies, et cetera, to better detect and understand threat activity. And another one is government-wide visibility through a centrally located EDR initiative implemented by CISA to support host-level visibility, attribution, and response across federal information systems. And then we have M2209 Zero Trust Architecture. So in January of 2022, this memo was released, which moves the federal enterprise to a zero trust architecture. The foundational tenet of the zero trust model is, kind of as the name implies, right? No actor, system, network, or service operating outside or within the security perimeter is trusted. So instead of trust but verify, it's don't trust and still you need to verify. All traffic is encrypted as defined in EO 14028, and users should log into applications, not networks. This shifts the emphasis to stronger enterprise identity and access controls. And the memo requires agencies achieve a level of zero trust security by the end of fiscal year 2024. So before we get started on the next set of labs, I want to introduce Judy Baltonsberger, who is going to give us a demo of the ES6 version of the dashboard. It's not necessarily new, hot off the press anymore, but we are operating in our environment in ES5 right now. So to give you a demo and talk about some of the things that ES6 provides, I'm going to introduce Judy. Judy's the project manager for the CDM Dashboard effort here at CISA. She oversees the development and implementation of the CDM Dashboard. So welcome, Judy. Thanks for taking time out of your afternoon, your busy afternoon, to join us and tell us about ES6 and whatever other good information you have for us.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me. So I'm gonna click share the screen. And if you can give me a thumbs up that you can see it. Actually, can you see the screen?
I'm seeing a blank screen right now, Judy.
Let me try again. Share. It's just the screen. Okay. Can you see it now?
I'm seeing the slide deck. Yes, I
Success
can
now?
see the CDM Dashboard knowledge base.
Okay, is it big enough?
Yeah, that's perfect right there.
Okay. Excellent. So where I am going to start is you're going to get to see our sandboxes. So this first sandbox here on the left-hand side, this is actually a representation of our agency dashboard. The reason you know this is the simulated environment is because you can see the various individuals on the dashboard portfolio team and the training team and where they have created their custom spaces. So this is how we familiarize ourselves with the dashboard. And as we're walking through the development cycles, we validate that what we asked to be developed is being developed according to plan. And so towards the end, I'm going to show you what our plan is for this program increment. But what I first wanted to do was show you what does the agency dashboard look like versus the federal dashboard. And so for many of you, we've been enabling cross-cluster search across all of our agencies, and now we have 93 connected. Oh, and I also forgot to introduce, I also have another member of my team here with me today, Harold Alfaro. He's one of the engineers that supports the dashboard team. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. He's here to help me. I don't see the chat when I'm sharing my screen, so please feel free to insert the questions there. So what the key element of ES6 was, and the reason it's the baseline, is because what we're doing is we're retiring the legacy. You can see here the name of the legacy federal and legacy. That's when we were using summary data. So what happened with ES6 is we baselined something called operational visibility. What we're using is an elastic out-of-the-box capability called cross-cluster search. So as we had enabled cross-cluster search at 93 out of 94 agencies, we're literally waiting on one, and it's the signature on an ISA. So once the ink dries and we're able to do that last connection, we'll have visibility for all of the agencies that currently have a signed MOA participating in CDM. So for your awareness, there's a little over 100 agencies on the gold list, but only 94 of them have signed memorandums of agreement, and they're working with CDM to deploy a solution. So with cross-cluster search, we're able to do something called operational visibility. So what I wanted to show you today is what does it look like once your system, your agency dashboard is on ES6 baseline, and then what do we see up on the federal dashboard? So let's start with the first tab, and what do you see? And so this is where you got to walk through your dashboard in the lab. And so we still have the basic overview, and we're going to have a navigation along the bottom here where you can see an overview of your environment and your aware score, what system boundaries you have visibility of, and then obviously the key tenets and core foundations of CDM, which are hardware, HWAM, software, SWAM, misconfigurations, vulnerabilities, and then we also have the master user record with users. And so your master device record is going to be a combination of HWAM, hardware, software, misconfigurations, and vulnerabilities. Your master user record is going to be an accumulation of your privileged users, credentialed users, and then any type of information that your agency was able to share with us about trust and behave, which means have you taken your most recent cybersecurity awareness training, and do you have the appropriate entry on duty security clearance to do your job if you're a privileged user. But the general navigation has stayed the same, and this is what you're going to see on your agency dashboard. So when you're navigating to another space, the key ones that you need to keep track of are one, which is directives, which is the point of this class. So you'll click on directives dashboard. And the key element here, because I'm going to jump to the federal dashboard, is they literally look the same. And so that is why with cross-cluster search, if you guys can see the screen here, you'll notice up at the top how many instances we have, number of instances by the various directives. This particular graph here is what it's trying to communicate is the binding operational directive as it relates to system boundaries. So because I'm in the agency dashboard, these are going to be the system boundaries. And granted, I'm in a simulated environment, so we're simulating a lab that thinks it's DHS. So these are the fake system boundaries for our fake DHS agency. Down here, we have our CVIDs, we have instances of software, the various sub-agencies that are part of our agency DHS, and our trend of instances. And then we also have a detailed table down below, which you guys did this in your lab, so that you can go and track a specific vulnerability. So the beauty of the elastic cross-cluster search is that when I go click on the federal dashboard and I go to operational visibility directives, I, as the CISA analyst, when I'm looking at the dashboard, the only difference is that I'm able to see data across multiple agencies, but it's going to be very similar. So because my simulated environment is only DHS agency, notice how it looks the same. So the only difference that you would see in our production environment is down under tier 0. We have a list of all 93 agencies that are connected, and then our total instance is actually different. But if I knew I was on the phone working an incident like Dave was describing, and I was going to only be talking to you and you happen to be at DHS, then I could go and choose what I want to filter on. So I want to look, say, at the vulnerabilities. So I'm going to select the data view, and then I can go and add the organization filter for tier 0. And I'm going to say is equal to DHS. And then by me filtering my federal dashboard, I will have an exact match for what you're seeing inside your agency dashboard. So that's the level of transparency that we have. And what we're trying to enable is that when you're on the phone with the CISA analyst, we're both looking at the same view. And my hope is that through that transparency, by us using the data and keeping it within your agency dashboard, the data stays at your agency dashboard. So that means that's the authoritative source. We're not replicating and we are not copying the data to the federal dashboard. What we are doing is we're conducting a query that is being sent down through the browser, layer 7 through HTTPS, and it is sending the question that sits behind this panel. So for example, if I want to see the top CVEs, I can go and I can either inspect what that question was, or I can actually go explore it and discover, and I can see the exact saved search. So if I go click on explore and discover, and I'm the CISA analyst, knowing that I'm getting ready to call the person on the phone at DHS, then I can see that it's looking at DHS, it's looking at all their directives, and then I can get the detailed data. From here on the left-hand side, I can then pick very specific fields and be very, very specific about what I wanted to talk about. And so what you noticed is I could go from a high-level aggregation summary of where's the worst problem that we want to look at, and then I could drill down into the details. And from here, I can be very specific. And there's literally 192 different attributes I could pull up, and I could understand what type of endpoint or category of endpoint is that vulnerability on? Is it on a laptop? Is that laptop part of a system boundary that happens to be a high vulnerability asset, an HVA? And all of those can be added with a push of a button here on the left-hand side. So with that being said, I'm going to jump back to the main directives page. And so back here in the agency dashboard, the ones that you really need to be focusing on for metrics. And so what I'm going to do is kind of show you what all of them look like. And then I'm going to jump over and tell you what we have planned for development coming in the future. So definitely focus on BOD 2201. Probably the most important element of BOD 2201 is what is your asset inventory metric score. So what I'm going to do is show you probably the best place to get reference materials if you are not familiar with how the asset inventory metric is calculated. So the first place I recommend that you go is our knowledge base, which this is accessible to agencies. You just have to submit a ticket, and then we whitelist or allow list your IP address so that you can come here and get access to documentation. So inside the documentation, there are the ES6 baseline, and I strongly encourage you to read the release notes. And then the other thing I strongly encourage you to take a look at is the user guide, which I'm going to click to other tabs and show you what that looks like. That's going to help you find the asset inventory metric. Because we are now deploying content packs, we also have basic documentation on each of those. Many of you are, and I'm not sure which agencies you're from, we've already started deploying 6.01, 2, and 3. 6.03 literally came out like a week ago. We have 6.04 under development, which you'll see in our sprint planning when I show you those pages. But if you want to see actual documentation specific to that content pack, we have release notes, a version description, which tells you what version of Elastic product your dashboard needs to be on. And we also have test documentation and the actual install files. So this is the organization structure for the documentation you need to be looking at. For the release notes, the reason I encourage you to read the release notes is because up at the top, we're going to tell you the most important information that is coming out. So eventually I'm going to go back to the dashboard, but things that you need to start keeping track of is we have added the OMB memorandum for IP version 6 statuses. And I believe that is the M2107. So we have added that visibility into the dashboard, and I'll show you where that is. And then, as all of you know, we're still continuing to track the vulnerability findings. We've added some additional data points for the KEV catalog. As you know, we've added BOD 2301 reporting. You heard that from multiple speakers today. You're very familiar now with the asset inventory metric and how that's calculated, which I'm going to show you the user guide, which explains how that calculation works. But you can see from just these first couple of bullet points what we're focused on, and everything is about not only metrics and ES6 baseline, but many of the content packs, both those that have recently been deployed and those that are coming in the future. So the idea is that we're trying to get the metric deployed into the dashboard, if I can, 6 months in advance, so that we can start collecting the data from your agency solution through the system integrator. We can start looking at potential data quality discrepancies and or findings and start to resolve those before it becomes a binding operational directive and you're being held accountable for specific reporting. So the goal of the dashboard is to get ahead of the metric reporting, which is why I'm giving you heads up on where we're going. But in order to get caught up on where you need to be right now, you need to understand your asset inventory metric, which that needs to be at a coverage level of 80%. And you need to be comfortable with BOD 2201 and 2301 reporting, as well as IPv version 6. So I would say that's what you need to be comfortable with right now. If you need additional details above and beyond practicing the labs in this class today, we have a user guide. And what I wanted to do was show you how the AIM score is calculated. So you notice here, we're taking the FSMA self-reported device count. So remember, when you report a number to Cyberscope, we're actually exporting the data from Cyberscope for your asset devices, importing it into the dashboard, and then from there, we're calculating your asset count over a 30-day period, dividing the two. If there were any days that were a 0, and that's because life happens, we know that there were times when system maintenance was happening on your dashboard, and either you were being upgraded to ES6, you had a content pack that was updated, for some reason the power went out and your server rebooted, whatever the maintenance scenario might be. If there is a 0 over the course of that 3-month period or 30-day calculation, we are not counting that. So that might not be obvious, but that's one of the caveats. And so when you're calculating your score, you need to know who submitted your FSMA number and what does that look like? What is your number inside the agency dashboard? And then we divide those. And so probably the things to note is that we're looking at your dashboard data for the last 30 days. We're looking at your FSMA number for the last 3 quarters, which is 90 days. And then we're dividing the two. You guys can see the calculation of the score there in the screenshot. So with that being said, I am now going to jump back to the agency dashboard. And I think both BOD 2201 is important, and then BOD 2301 is important. And the reason being is with BOD 2301, we are starting to understand how many hosts were seen on your environment within the last 7 days. We're starting to see what kind of vulnerabilities do you have? Were those vulnerability scans completed? These are typically these two panels are for the vulnerability scans internal on your environment. Did they have credentials? Did they not have credentials? How many hosts were scanned within the last 14 days? What was the average age of the scan? How many hosts had missing vulnerability scans? What does that trend look like? So we would be asking ourselves with this fake data, why did we have this drop off? We also are looking at vulnerability detection signatures. How current are they across your hosts? How old are they? What's the trend across your environment? What are the current signatures across the different vendor products? There's a table, so you can drill down into that. Every time you see a table, you can actually dive all the way down into the Discover and get a very specific look. And with that, you can be very precise and know the exact host name where this information is coming from, their IP address, their MAC address, etc. Down here below, we have hosts and scans. So we're now collecting all of the device scans off every host. That's what's coming with ES6, the baseline. And so this is what you see on an agency dashboard. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump over and show you what does it look like on the federal dashboard. And it's going to look exactly the same. The only difference is we're going to have a list. We're going to see this for all the agencies. But you notice the host discovery is the same. The vulnerability enumeration is the same. And that's because we're doing a cross-cluster query of your authoritative source data that sits inside your agency dashboard. There's no cloning of data, no copying of data. We're doing a distributed, federated search across the network for all the agencies. So that's why it's important for us to always choose the specific agency when we're talking to you on the phone. So some other areas I wanted to point out on your agency dashboard is where metrics are coming. You have the FY23 metrics. So several of the content packs, they made updates to these FSMA metrics. And the first area was enumerating the environment, and you can see the navigation bar along the bottom. So with enumerating the environment, these are going to be your Cyberscope metrics. So we're able to go and collect these metrics from FY23 using CDM data. And we've been doing that for as long as the ES6 baseline has been in place. And you can look through these metrics. So as we refine and get confidence in these numbers, then those can be automatically reported, just like we've been doing the KEV findings. They can be automated and automatically sent over to Cyberscope. So you can see the type of information up above. You can see the scan percentages over the last 42 days. That's one thing to note. Remember, your AIM score is the last 30 days, but your FY23 metrics are over the last 42 days. So when you're navigating these panes, please look for the details, or what you can do is hover over this little eye and it will tell you how it was calculated. So you can see the a high level summary there. The next item I wanted to point out to you is, remember I told you we're now starting to track the M2107 IPv6. So in your dashboard, you're going to be able to see what percentage of your network is IPv4, dual stack, IPv6, or unknown. And then you have a detailed table down below. The other item that has come with the most recent content pack is actually smart patching. So with smart patching, notice how now we can recognize the mean time to remediate. So we're starting to calculate how long is it taking us as a FSEB, all the agencies, to actually remediate our KEVs. And so remember, this is simulated data that I'm showing you in here. And so the reason I wanted you to note all of these is because I'm going to go click on a blog that was actually posted yesterday by Eric Goldstein. So the KEV catalog is now at 1,000. And so this whole article talks about what does that mean and what have we learned. And so you're going to see in this article some metrics are being shared down below. And so I think you should take a look at this. How many, since last November 2021, how many FSEB agency KEV vulnerabilities have been remediated? Over 12 million. That means 7 million were just in this calendar year alone. Then what kind of percentage increase is that? A 72% decrease? Like, that's how much risk we're reducing in your environments when you're able to patch those known exploited vulnerabilities. And then how long is it taking you to do it? So we're actually able to calculate the mean time to remediate. And these numbers for this particular article were mostly done by hand. But you saw in the dashboard, we have automated all of that. So as all 93, 94 agencies get onto ES6 and the most current content pack, all of these metrics are going to be automated, and you will be able to see them as well as us on the federal dashboard. For this article to be generated, we on the federal dashboard side had to do a lot of this by hand, but we've automated all of it. Another item to note, oh, here, mean time to remediate. Remember, I told you that. So notice how over the last year, we've noticed it's about 9 days faster and then 36 days faster for the internet facing. So that information is actually coming from the SciHi data. So with that being said, what I wanted to do was jump over to what do we plan on working on. So you noticed last week we deployed our ES 6.04 content pack, and this actually is our sprint plan. So you can see we finished that work, and the next thing that we are actually working on, this ES 6.10 patch is actually for our federal dashboard. The next content pack that's coming for the agency is down here at the bottom. So you'll be anticipating a 6.04 content pack before November. And what's planned for that, you can see up here, we are looking at adding MAV data, that's mobile data. We're also making available to the agency dashboard. You can see here, we're doing data feeds from the cyber hygiene data, and we're going to make that visible within the agency dashboard. Here you can see we're going to produce an executive view of the BOD 2301. That way, those high-level metrics I told you that were in that blog, we're building an executive view that is going to mirror that. So you're going to be able to see exactly what we're seeing from an executive view. Notice how these two match. And so that's the key to our transparency, is we're trying to make sure that you have the same visibility that we have. The next item is we are looking at improving the end of life metrics with available data. Scrolling down here to agency dashboard, we're also going to make sure that you can drill down to all of the FSMA metrics and that you understand how it was calculated. You can see another couple stories down here on agency data where we're adding how do you visualize high value asset data. So you can see we're building a dashboard to visualize the high value assets, and we're focusing on the first couple of data sets, which are misconfigurations, vulnerability, and software. And then we have another enhancement for this BOD 2301, and then we have HWAM data for high value assets. We have a couple of performance metric enhancements for the FSMA metrics. We're doing those enhancements right there. So this literally is our set of sprints and the work that we are working on. And I showed you a highlight of what work is targeted for the agency dashboard. And in many ways, for several of those, anything involving a metric, we try to make sure that the same dashboard exists on the agency as it does on the federal. And the only user navigation difference on the federal dashboard is us filtering on the specific agency. So the hope is that when we're on the phone, you're seeing exactly what we're seeing. So with that being said, the only other teasers I was going to leave you with is right before I jumped onto this call, I decided to look up what was the most prevalent vulnerability in the actual production environment. And I was surprised. It's actually a Microsoft vulnerability for the remote code execution. This is actually present on a lot of the laptops across several of the agencies. So what I would encourage you as homework, take the lab that you did in this class, and when you get back to your agency, look up and see if you can find this particular vulnerability on your endpoints. It's the most prevalent vulnerability across the FSEB. And so you need to go see, is it actually at your agency? And then find out when is it going to actually be patched. The reason being is because the due date is passed. The goal was to have all of these patched by August 29th. And as you can see, we've slipped a couple of days. So this would be an example of a vulnerability that the fight team and the agency cyber officers would be looking at, because we were hoping to have it patched across all the environment by August 29th. We have some stragglers, and because it is so prevalent across so many of the agencies, it's percolating to the top. It's on the KEVs, so there are known exploits. That means the attackers are targeting those endpoints. Another one that I looked up and that I would encourage you to go look as homework on your dashboard, your actual agency dashboard, was what was the most prevalent critical vulnerability, and it happened to be in the Google Chrome browser, and so it is this vulnerability. And in the production data, this was the most prevalent critical vulnerability. So what that tells me is a lot of the agencies have Google Chrome as well as the Microsoft Edge and other browsers on their endpoints that they're provisioning. So they probably have multiple browsers. And what you probably need to do is look to see, is this on your agency network? When is the next patching cycle? And was it being covered? Because it looked like all the Microsoft Edge vulnerabilities got patched, but for some reason the Google didn't happen. And so when we're looking at the trending tables, we can see spikes where the vulnerabilities added to a scanning tool and the Nessus plugin is updated. And then over the next 2 to 3 days, we see the volume of the vulnerabilities increase. And then as the patching windows come up at each of the agencies, we see the trend line come back down. But what we saw with this is there were several agencies where we didn't see anything happen in the month of August. So it's almost as if this patch was missed on the patching cycle. And you can see this vulnerability is from a while ago. So somehow it's being missed. And so what I wanted to do was share with you what we're seeing in the production environment so that you can go take these as homework assignments and practice your lab on your real agency environment. And then when you're meeting with your agency cyber officer from FIGHT, you're not going to be surprised by some of the questions. Because if you could go and start exploring what I was saying with making sure you're comfortable with directives, the FSMA metrics, I would say those are probably the most important places to look first, and then make sure you know your asset inventory metric score. And you can navigate across all of these. And probably the last thing I will disclose is with this version of ES6, we are on Elasticsearch 8.7.1. And for your awareness, we discovered a bug in that version of Elastic, and it is impacting our trending data. So if your agency is impacted by that because you're on Elastic 8.7.1, for your awareness, we know about that. Elastic has already produced a patch for it and fixed it. We are testing that next version. I believe it is Elastic 8.9.1 or .2. So they've released that to us, Elastic has. We're testing it in our lab. What we discovered in our lab is this navigation menu is not operating as intended. So that's why we haven't made the patch available to you at the agencies yet. Once we fix this navigation bar so that it works with the new Elastic 8.9, then you will be getting a new content pack as well as a patch. So remember here when I said we had a bug, we are working on that patch. And so the first one we're building is for the federal dashboard. If that fixes the problem completely, then we'll be pushing that out to the agencies. And so these two are related. We also are rolling up some other items on the federal dashboard. We're updating our Mandiant API so that we'll get the most current up-to-date cyber threat intel feed data that we've been enriching the vulnerability with. But the bug I was just transparent about and disclosed. I said we're working on it. It's coming with the 6.1 patch. The item that you need to be looking out for is this content pack. And with that content pack will be the visualizations related to the agency dashboard. Because content packs are only spaces, dashboards, visualizations. They're basically Kibana saved objects. They make no other changes to the solution. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there were any questions. So that was all the content I was going to share.
Awesome. So much great information as usual. Thank you, Judy. I see somebody asked a question. I don't know if that was on anything you showed or if that was in our...
So can you explain the contractor field? Yes, I can. So Daniel Green. So there is the ability by the system integrator to assign whether or not the facility is contractor owned, contractor operated, whether it's government owned, contractor operated. And so when we have the contractor field, that is something that you are allowed to provide the system integrator, and then they can specify that. The tier 0 organization is always going to be the department. The tier 1 is always going to be the sub-agency, but we also have tiers below that. And those tiers typically are the facilities and or locations. And with those facilities and locations, agencies can choose from a drop down that defines, like I said, government owned, government operated, government owned, contractor operated, and like GoCo, etc. And so that's where we get that enumerated field with a data attribute specifying contractor. Does that make sense? For the next question, Corey, if you want to know what content pack you're on, let me go back to the agency dashboard. So down here on the bottom, we're only giving you the baseline version. So if you want to know what specific content pack you're on, you need to click on spaces, and you're going to go to the health reporting. And in health reporting, notice here where it says installed components. And so this particular dashboard, if I scroll down through here, I am on content pack 6.1.0. So you can tell in my sandbox that the developers are already working on that patch I was telling you about with the Elastic bug. Because I'm showing you the actual development sandbox. And so you're getting to see not only baseline ES6, but you're getting to see what's in development. And so you can see the other versions that were pushed out to the sandbox. But this content pack is 6.1.0. Okay, so I clicked on the space health reporting. Under health reporting, I scrolled down to a panel called installed component versions. And then within that panel, I scrolled down to the component called content pack. And you can see that I'm in the development sandbox, which is our lab. And what's installed that you got to see today was 6.1.0 patch. And this one is in development. So at the end of the day, I hope you go back and log into your agency dashboards and look at those CVEs that I mentioned, because that was me looking at our production data right before I jumped on. And so go see if your agency, that way you can practice your lab in your real environment. And I gave you ones that we can actually see.
Great
So good luck
advice.
hunting.
Great advice. Great presentation. Thank you so much, Judy. Appreciate it.
Take care. Have a nice day.
Likewise. Awesome. So a lot of great information there. And now we are going to dive back into some lab exercises so we can continue learning how to use the dashboard and the directives and looking for KEVs and things like that. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to John to get us started on our next lab.
All right, thanks, Mike. And special thanks to Judy for all that information. We always enjoy having her as a guest speaker because she just has all the firsthand knowledge. So hope you enjoyed that. What we're going to do now is we're going to start on Lab 2, and you're going to be using the Directives Overview Dashboard to identify hosts with the highest number of instances for a specific CVE. And then also you'll use the Directives Overview Dashboard to identify hosts with instances on a specific date. So you'll be looking at items within a specific date. So let's go ahead. We'll put, what do we got here? Let's put 15 minutes on the clock. That should be more than enough. And just like before, we'll debrief it at the end. So go ahead and start on Lab 2, and we'll see you back in about 15 minutes. All right, welcome back, everybody. Let's go ahead and take a look at lab number 2. So I will go ahead and share out my screen here so we can debrief it. And I am already on the directives overview dashboard, as you can see. So this particular lab has a little scenario that goes along with it. And it says that the information management officer at FEMA has requested a list of the hosts with the highest critical CVE related to all BODs and EDs for November 12th, 2022. So I'd like to begin remediation on the findings as soon as possible. So what we need to do is go find all of the BODs and CVEs for November 12th, right? So let's take a look at the steps here. My date is okay. Okay, I've got May 1st to November 30th, so that's all right. The first thing we're going to do is narrow this down by organization ID, which is FEMA. All right, so we're going to add a filter, and I'm going to say organization ID, and all I have to do is type in org, and that brings up the list. Select is for the operator, and we'll select FEMA out of the list, and we'll say save. And you'll notice as I do that, the information changes. Okay. Now, step 7 and 8 just want you to review the information. If we scroll down, we can see that we are filtering on FEMA. Okay, and then step 8 is just an example of how to sort a particular column. Okay, so you can sort it by old to new, new to old, etc. Okay, so the first thing then in step 9, it says using the list of instances vulnerabilities, okay, which is where we are here. It says hover over the value of critical. And so what we're going to do is we're going to filter now for critical because we're looking for FEMA and critical vulnerabilities. Okay. And next, remember we're looking for the most vulnerabilities according to our scenario. So if we go up here and we look at instances by CVE ID, we see that this one here has 297 instances. So we're going to go ahead and click this. Okay, and that's going to create a filter. And you'll see here that we are now filtering for FEMA, critical, and we have CVE 2020-1350. Okay, so that takes us to step 11, where we're going to need to add a filter. Okay, so remember we're looking for November 12th. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to come up here and we need to click on Add Filter. And we're going to say select field here, which is going to be vulnerability finding last found date. So we're going to say, I'm just going to say last. And that brings up the list with all the last items in it. And it's the last one here on the list. And we're going to say is between. Now, even though we're looking for a single day, we still have to do a date range so that we get everything. Okay, so we're going to say 11/12/2022 to 11/13/2022. Okay, and that will give us everything for November 12th. Okay, and you'll notice then that it changes. We have 37 items. If I scroll down, you can see here that everything is listed as November 12th. So we have 37 items for November 12th. All right, so at that point, it just wants you to be able to share this out. And the one way that you can do that is by doing a link. So if I click share here, and then I click permalinks, it brings up this little panel, okay? And you can either send a snapshot or a saved object, either one. So if we were to have saved this off, we would send a saved object, okay, which means that it would update each time that the link is accessed. In this case, it's just a snapshot, which is just that. It's a snapshot in time. So, what you see is what you'll get, right? Now, you can just say copy link, and then it's ready to go into an email or whatever type of, whatever medium you're using. However, just know that the recipient needs to have the appropriate permissions in order to view it. So, they would need to have the same permissions, I suppose, as the sender in order to view the link. But as long as they have the appropriate permissions, they can see it. Otherwise, it won't be visible. So keep that in mind as you're sending links. Okay, this brings us to our knowledge checks. So let's take a look at number 1 here. It says from the directives overview dashboard. It says delete the vulnerability last found date filter. Okay, so let's get rid of that. Just this one right here. Okay, now it says leave the remaining filters in place and identify the host that has had vulnerability CVE 2020-1350 the longest. Okay, so we're going to go down here. It says use the vulnerability finding first found date column for your answer. So what we'll do here, right here is vulnerability finding first found date. If I move this over, you can kind of see the title. Then I know some of these are kind of long. Okay, but all we need to do then is sort this column from old to new. Okay. And that should give us, let's see here, I think I just messed it up. Let me go ahead and try that again. Vulnerability finding, first found date, we want old to new. I think I turned it off is what happened. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so if we look over here on the left-hand side, we can see that host 236 is at the top of the list. We have several items here that are old from June 20th, 2022. But since this one is at the top of the list, we'll go with that. So our answer for number 1 is B, host 236. Okay. All right, number 2. Just add a filter and determine how many hosts were first found to have CVE ID 2020-1350 on July 22nd, 2022. All right, so we're going to have to create a filter. So let's go back up here. And we're going to say add filter. And we're going to say vulnerability finding first found date. So I'm just going to type in first is between. And we're looking for what? July 22nd, right? So 07/22/2022 to 07/23/2022. And we'll say save. And that gives us 2 items for July 22nd. Okay, so for number 2, our answer is D, 2 instances. Okay, now number 3, it says remove the vulnerability finding first found date. Okay, let's get rid of that. And it says modify the remaining filters and determine how many instances of vulnerability 2020-1350 are present in the DHS organization. Okay, so currently, if I look at my filter set here, I'm filtering on FEMA and not DHS, right? So all I need to do is edit this filter to DHS. So if I click it and say edit filter, I can say organization ID is DHS, save it off, and that gives us 846 items. Okay, as you can see here, 846 instances. Okay, so our answer is C, 846. All right, last one, number 4. Okay, edit your filter set and identify the count of all vulnerabilities within FEMA with a severity rating of critical or high. Okay, so first thing we need to do is go back here to organization ID and set it back to FEMA. So we'll just edit it back. We'll say organization ID is equal to FEMA. Okay, so we have that set. And next we have to remove the CVE ID. So there's a couple of ways you can do this. If you notice there's a little X next to each of these, you can delete those out. Or if you click it, you can also temporarily disable it. So I'm just going to disable it this time. It does the same thing as deleting it, eliminates it from the search. Okay, and then lastly, it says with a severity rating of critical or high. All right, so if we go here, we've got our severity set to critical already, but we need to include high. So I'm going to say edit filter, vulnerability finding severity is one of critical and high. And I'll say save. And that leaves us with 3,500 instances, or 3.5K. Okay, so there's organization ID FEMA and vulnerability finding of critical and high. So that's the number of instances at FEMA that are critical and high. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. We'll get back to our presentation. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. He's going to take you through the last lab of the day. Mike, over to you.
All right, thanks, John. Yeah, last lab number 3, using Kibana to identify known exploited vulnerabilities. So kind of, the scenario that Judy gave us, using the dashboard to look for those KEVs that haven't been remediated. Well, going to have a kind of specific lab exercise kind of geared for that. So, yeah, well, let's do, because we're on our last hour, just to make sure we have time for everything. I know we haven't really given much in the way of breaks, but this one's fairly short, so we'll do 15 minutes, and hopefully you'll have time to still take a quick break if you need one. That way we'll make sure we finish up on time today. And then at the end of the 15, we'll do another quick debrief, and then we'll start concluding. All right, well, let's debrief our last lab here, lab 3. So, not sure if you saw or read the scenario, but the scenario is you've been asked to determine if there are any critical KEV vulnerabilities that have not been remediated on system boundary 4. To do this, you'll need to use the CDM agency dashboard to filter for information within your agency, which is DHS contractor. Identify the KEVs and create a report that can be shared with management. So, yeah, the first thing it has us do is go to the agency dashboard. So let me go ahead and share out my screen here. All right, so hopefully everybody sees my screen okay. And so I've already done that. I've selected the agency dashboard, and then our next step is to go and find the right index, which is CDM vuln current, and because it's alphabetical, it's all the way towards the bottom of the list because of vuln. So I have that selected already, and then you'll notice too that I have all these already in blue, the popular fields, and those are ones that the system recognizes that you've used recently or frequently, so they'll always kind of be at the top unless you reset it. But so with our scenario, we want to know several things. Being one, that we're using ES5 version, so we're kind of doing the old school way of finding KEVs, right? Judy showed you what ES6 has some different views and capabilities there, but in general, if you break down the dashboard and Elasticsearch, it's just, it's gathering all this data, and we're just kind of knowing how to use the dashboard, knowing which dashboards display what information for that high level view, and then knowing how to drill down to find specific information within those. So we need the vulnerability finding CVE FVA status, and we just find what we need. We select the plus down here, and if they weren't already in my popular, it would just go to search field and start typing, and it will start to populate. Vulnerability finding remediated. Let's see, we want organization ID. So we need to look for the DHS contractor. We need system boundary ID. So we know we're going to be looking for system boundary 4. Vulnerability finding CVE ID. CVE severity. We want the last found date, days active, and host ID. And there we go. So we have those all along the top, and we see all the data below it. We see that there's 28,513 hits. And then it has us add a filter. So we start typing vulnerability finding CVE, because we're looking for CVE FVA status. So let's go ahead and add filter, vulnerability underscore finding dot CVE dot FVA. Oop, helps if you spell correct. And then select it. We want select is, and then we want true, because we're looking for ones that have an FVA status associated. And then, because that's the old school way, I guess, of looking for KEVs, as if it's a FVA status true. So click save, and then you give it a second, and then you can see it. We're now down to 22,000 plus hits. All right, so from there, we need to add a few more filters, and it has us do it via the shortcut method, because we're looking for KEVs within the DHS contractor organization on system boundary 4. So we look for a false in the vulnerability finding remediated column, and you can drag these around. I know they're kind of hard to see because we got it all scrunched up. So yeah, so we want to look for false here. See false. Let's go ahead and filter false. And so then next one is we want to look for DHS contractor. So we can see that one right here in our organization ID. So let's filter for that. Click the plus. And then when it's yellow, then we know that that's what it filtered for. And then we need 2 more filters here. So we need vulnerability finding CVE severity of critical, and boundary ID system boundary 4. So let's go system boundary 4, filter there. And then we want critical here. All right, so we've brought that number all the way down to 1,294. Then it asks us to go ahead and save the search off. And so you would click save, put in a title on the lab guide that says KEV identification query. It's always a good idea to put in a description, because when you start saving a bunch with similar titles, it can get confusing on which is which. And yeah, so, and I already have that saved, so you can see how to open it now, and I can see other folks have put stuff in there. Actually, let me just go ahead and save it to make it simple. KEV ID query. I'm not going to worry about the description, but we'll save. Oh, it already exists. 1. So, and then we talk about how to share this, right? Because we want to send this to management. And in John's last one, he did the permalinks, so you can share the link, but that's assuming that whoever you're sending it to has access to the dashboard as well, with the same same access that you have. But there's also the CSV report. And so if you want to generate a CSV, just click on that, generate CSV, and then you download the report. Then you'd have to open the file from the downloads. Give it a second, and it popped up on my other screen. So actually, since I'm not sharing screen, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but you know, it's an Excel spreadsheet. And so that's what you would want to share with whoever you want to share it with that might not have access. And it's good for when you have, you know, thousands of or you have a lot of data. You know, it's different if you have 10 or 20 items, but if you're talking about, you know, 20,000 hits or something, then it'd be easier to sift through it with this in an Excel spreadsheet. So that is that. Then we have the knowledge checks. Let me go ahead and close my Excel on this page. So return to the Discover tool with the existing filters in place, modify your report, and determine the greatest number of days these vulnerabilities have been active in system boundary 4. So you want to, you know, sort through your vulnerability finding days active, and that should be this category right here. And we want to go high to low, looking for the highest number. Give it a second, and we can see 150 is our answer there. So answer to number 1 is D, 150. Question 2, modify your filters and determine how many vulnerabilities across all systems. So keyword there is all system boundaries and all severity ratings were found in the DHS contractor organization on November 16th. So what we want to do here is we want to disable our system boundary ID filter. Like John mentioned earlier, disabling is just like deleting it, but you know, it's already there if something happens and you need to use it again. So click temporarily disable. We want to disable the vulnerability finding CVE severity because we're looking for all severity levels. Temporarily disable. And then we want to add, since we're looking for that one date, so you know, we could do it on here, I believe, but I prefer to add a filter. So let's go vulnerability finding dot last found date. There it is. And then is, and then for value, you can do it several different ways, but I do it with the year dash month and day. And then click save. And so it should all be filtered now. And so we see that there's 2,468 hits right here. So that is the correct answer, A, 2,468. All right, question 3. It says modify your filters and determine how many vulnerabilities have been remediated in the CBP organization on November 16th of 2022. So now we want to take The remediated, we want to change that to true. So let's edit that filter, turn it to true, click save. And we're looking for the CBP organization, not the DHS contractor. So let's edit that. CBP, click save. Give it a second to think. And there we go, 562 hits. So the answer is B, 562. And then our fourth question, it says start with your current filter set and determine how many vulnerabilities were designated with a severity of high or medium. So we had disabled vulnerability finding severity critical earlier. So we want to re-enable that one. And then we want to edit it. And we're looking for, so if we have the operator is, we can only select one value. But if we select an operator that says is one of, then we can select multiple values. So we're looking for high and medium. So high and medium. And then let's click save. All right, so now we see that we have 326 hits. So answer A, 326 is the correct answer. So again, to kind of summarize these, it's about learning how to find the right dashboards. If you're looking for BODs and EDs, finding those right dashboards. Apologize for our links, but we had a workaround for here. But ES6 has a lot more capabilities as far as that's concerned with the KEVs and the BODs and EDs, but as far as the overall functionality of how to use the dashboard and finding information with select, you got to know all these fields, unfortunately, and there's a lot of fields, but if you know what fields you need and you know what index to select, those are some of the biggest things. So please take time to get familiar with those. If you haven't had much opportunity to use the dashboard, that's going to be a real big help to you. Regarding our training environment, it's all fictional data. Some of the data isn't populated in some cases, but it's still good to practice with, and the range will be open and available to you through the end of the week. So 4 o'clock Eastern time on Friday. Please feel free to go into the dashboard and continue to practice, especially if maybe you didn't have, I know some people are having trouble logging in for the first 1 or 2 labs. So go back and use that. All right, let's go ahead and start on our last topic, which is only a few slides here. So we'll get through these fairly quickly. So vulnerability response. The vulnerability response process employs standard vulnerability management programs that include phases for identifying, analyzing, remediating, and reporting vulnerabilities. So this graphic here illustrates and describes the vulnerability response process in terms of a standard vulnerability management program, and proactively identifying reports of vulnerabilities that are actively exploited in the wild by monitoring threat feeds and information sources is one of the primary activities of CISA threat hunters. The U.S. CERT, the National Cyber Awareness System, or NCAS, They provide a weekly bulletin containing vulnerability summaries, and NIST has their National Vulnerability Database that shows what the vulnerabilities are too that are being exploited. So please be sure to check those out if you've never checked those out. So with remediation best practices, what you see here is a list of some of those best practices, and some of these bullets may fall within the recommended checks and reviews that you already have in place. Your agency may have specific requirements or issues that it wants emphasized in addition to some of the more routine type activities. There may be specific vulnerabilities that require waivers or special circumstances, or that will need to be reported on a more frequent basis. All this goes into the process for remediating discrepancies. In all, you want to monitor and respond to discrepancies when they arise. You want to properly configure endpoints, establish a good battle rhythm, and use the dashboard to identify those worst problems first, and then respond accordingly. So with that, it's time to start wrapping things up here. So where do we go next? What's the road ahead look like? Judy kind of already gave us a glimpse into where things are headed with the dashboard and some of those content packs and things that are coming out. So, there's continuing to be progression on, the dashboard, and all the agencies kind of rolling up and getting all their data in there. So, and even though we've accomplished a lot, there's still a lot to come in terms of moving the needle to get us to more of a threat-based response posture, right? The dashboard basically is evolving to a service-based delivery model versus one size fits all, and that helps to better align with the broader CISA charter, which is to provide on-demand cyber services for agencies. The most notable thing here is that the dashboard is just continuing to evolve, get better, lessons learned, continuous process improvement, right? And continuing to add additional and improved capabilities and delivery models. So, all right, next. So we've covered quite a bit of ground the last few hours to include the process that directives go through in order to become operational. Along with that, we looked at some of the most current mandates, and we used the dashboard to identify KEVs. We also looked at vulnerability response procedures, as well as some best practices to remediate vulnerabilities when they arise. So as I mentioned, we've covered a lot, but I do want to ask one question. If you can raise your hand and let me know. Was this training of value to you? Would you come again to another one of our dashboard trainings if you can? All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks for the feedback. So with that said, I'm going to hand it back to John to go over some of the other training opportunities that we have. So over to you, John.
All right, thanks, Mike. So, okay. Mike kind of stole my question from me. I usually like to ask that question of folks to see how you're feeling at the end of the course. But where do you go from here? Mike kind of summed it up. Continue to practice on the dashboard. Use it, at every opportunity, because it's like anything else. The more you use it, the more familiar you're going to become with it, and the more comfortable you'll be using it. So now we also offer training. We have 2-day instructor-led courses that we give in person. We just had one, in fact. I think there's another one coming up in November, so keep an eye out for that if you're in the Northern Virginia area. And since you've attended this course, you have the opportunity to subscribe to the CDM Agency Dashboard training program through Gov Delivery. And what you'll receive are notifications about upcoming training. So definitely subscribe. And I'm going to pop the link here in the chat so you have that. And what you do is you visit the link, and I believe they ask you your email address and some basic questions. And then you're given a list of items that you would like to be notified about. So make sure that you select CDM Agency Dashboard Training Program. Okay. Also, as Mike mentioned, the cyber range will be available through 4 p.m. on Friday afternoon Eastern Time. So jump back in there. Take advantage of that, and work through your labs again, or just click around and see what you can learn on your own. It's a great opportunity for you. So all right. Let me ask one question for you here. How many of you, give me a thumbs up if you will, how many of you have a Fed VTE account? Okay, few of you, no, got a couple of thumbs down there. Okay, no problem. Okay, Fed VTE is an awesome resource. And what I'd like to do is go ahead and share out my screen just really quickly so that you can see a little bit about where our stuff is located so you can find it more easily. Also, the continuous diagnostics and mitigation training and resources link is where you register for courses. So let me go ahead and I'll share this out real quick. Continuous diagnostics and mitigation. This is the link that you see there on your slide, or that was on your slide. Be sure to take the slides with you, by the way. The links are all live links, and that way you have those available to you when you get back to your home or office, wherever you may be working. So, all right. So, Dashboard cyber range training. The training topics, if you notice here, we have several listed. CDM 220, which is what we've been through today. If you just click the little plus there, it expands it out and gives you a little blurb about what the course is about, so you can check out the different courses and see what might be of interest to you. If we scroll down, upcoming CDM training events, anything listed here you can register for. So I think, yeah, so since we're coming up on the end of the month here, we've only got one left for this month, but this will be updated soon. So, visit often to see what's new and exciting. And go ahead and register for it. All you need to do is click the link and answer the questions, and that gets you registered for the class. I think the next one coming up is vulnerability management here on September 28th. So that's also a good course. Also, virtual learning training environment, federal virtual training environment. So Fed VTE, if I give this a click, that takes me to the home page for Fed VTE. Now, for those of you that don't have an account, all you need to do is click register here, down here in the lower left corner, and give them your .gov email, and that way they can set you up with all the information that you need to get logged in. Okay. Now, if you are contractor support, you can use your corporate email. You just have to have a Fed employee to vouch for you. That's all. So, all right, let's take a look at Fed VTE and we'll see what we have in here. All right. Okay, landing page. I always like to point out the full catalog because there's a lot of great stuff in there, not just cybersecurity stuff. You know, there's certification things that you can take and all kinds of things. So definitely take a look at that. What I want to call your attention to, though, is right up here in the very center is CDM courses. And what I'll do is I'll go to CDM Dashboard Elastic Courses first. We'll take a look at that. And this is just basically a list of all of our courses that have been recorded. Now there's no hands-on activities. The labs are demonstrated. So you don't have those hands-on, you know, the hands-on activity, but you can log back in and review information if you're interested in doing that. CDM 220 is right here toward the bottom, so all you have to do is click Start Course, and it runs for about 3 hours, but I believe you don't need to do the whole thing at once. You can start and stop it as is convenient. Okay. Now, the next thing I want to show you is the CDM courses, CDM MicroLearn courses. And that brings us to this page, which has a number of different, we like to call them little YouTube videos because they're short little videos that are informative. And I think the longest one on here is 40 minutes. They average about 15 minutes each, I think. Now, Joe mentioned at the beginning of the session today that we have a brand new video here from Matt House, who speaks about the CDM agency dashboard and ES6 and, you know, where we're headed. So definitely take a look at that when you get a chance. All kinds of topics on here. Dashboard as a service, Binding Operational Directive 2201. In fact, let me just show you this one real quick since we're running short on time. I'll say resume course. And I just want to point this out because there are several videos that are like this. Now, when I click on start video, it brings up this page. And the link for the whole video is here at the top. Okay. Or you can view one of 5 sections. It's an interview that we did with 5, you know, questions basically. And we've broken them out into the 5 different questions, so you can view just the piece that's of interest to you. Okay, but I wanted to show you that so that you didn't think there was an error or something. Okay, I think that's all I have for that. Let me get back here. CDM courses, yes, okay. All right, let's get back to our file. And the next thing I want to share with you, and Judy basically went over this already, is this CDM dashboard knowledge base. If you don't have access to this, please request access. I'm going to pop the email in the chat. It's the same email that you see there on the slide. But what you need to do is contact them and let them know that you're interested in getting access to the dashboard, the knowledge base, and they will help you out from there. So there's all kinds of good stuff on there. I mean, Judy kind of displayed it for you. I mean, just, you know, release notes and all kinds of different things. So a lot of information, a lot of good information. So definitely get signed up for that. All right, points of contact. CDM dashboard training questions all go to Cyber Insights at cisa.dhs.gov. So any training problems you have or questions or comments, please send them to Cyber Insights. CDM training team lead is Joe Bukovac. He's the one that introduced us this morning, or excuse me, this afternoon. And he's always interested in your feedback. So please, let him know your comments or questions or whatever you have. Just feel free to email him directly. CDM at CISA.dhs.gov are all the CDM program office questions. So if you send them a training question, they'll just punt it back to us. So for the bigger questions, you can email them directly at the link at the address there. And then, of course, we have the access to FedVTE and then the knowledge base support email once again. Okay, and with all of that said, we have some resources that we have compiled here. These are some of the things that we talked about today, so you have the links to some of this information. So again, take the slides with you today and have those links available. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on behalf of Mike and myself and the entire training team. We appreciate you taking the time out today. So with that, we hope to see you at a future training event, and have a great rest of your day.